Welcome everybody to this conversation. It is in the frame of the Space Renaissance Conversations, the cycle of meetings that the Space Renaissance Academy is developing in order to compare different visions of the future into a century from now. I am Adriano Autino, the president of Space Renaissance International, and you are?
Howard Bloom, and I'm the founder of the Space Development Steering Committee. I'm a member of the Board of Governors of the National Space Society, and I'm the co-founder and chair of the Asian Space Technology Summit.
How many things?
Plus the
How
author,
many things?
plus the author of 6 books, and I appear on 500 radio stations in North America every once in a while. I've done it 204 times, and I appear on Saudi and Iranian television, and a whole bunch of other things.
So you're rather famous in the States and in the world.
At the furthest fringes of fame, and pursuing a strange pursuit. My goal is to engage with all of the sciences that my limited mind can understand and pull them together into a big picture. So I've been published or have done academic presentations in theoretical physics, cosmology, evolutionary biology, psychology, information science, and neurobiology, among other fields.
Quite interesting.
That was the big picture.
Quite interesting. And you are also an author of science fiction books.
Not science fiction, it's all nonfiction.
Yeah, let me say futurist, maybe. Futurist fiction.
I haven't written any futurist books. What I've done is, for the National Space Society 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I put together a vision called Garden the Solar System, Green the Galaxy.
Yeah.
And it's a visual manifesto for the future of life and the future of humanity. And it's been adopted as the official vision of the National Space Society. Just yesterday, I finished for a person in Scotland who is putting together an animation team at a university in England. I finished a 50-page visual manifesto for what we can accomplish in the next 20 years in space. And unfortunately, I didn't get time to send it to you because I finished it late last night.
Never mind. We will have time. I saw, however, a paper of yours about the greening the solar system or something like that.
Right, exactly.
And it's a very, very nice paper.
Thank you.
Yes, indeed. However, yes. So for these conversations, maybe you already saw that we have let me say, a cultural track or something like that. It's the work of James Corey. That's an author. There are 2 authors, by the way,
right.
that decided to sign themselves with this pseudonym of James Corey. And I think they wrote so far 6 books of this series, and a TV series was made on the basis of this work.
Oh, fantastic! Excellent.
It is called Expanse. It is.
Yes, Expanse is wildly popular in among the members of the Space Development Steering Committee.
Yeah, and well, I just read 3 books so far, the first 3, and so the 2 seasons complete, the first and the second season. I think the third one is on the way to be issued the next year or something like that. And I can say that I found the books very interesting from the point of view of modern vision of what could be our future into 100 years when humanity has colonized the solar system. They arrived up to Neptune. They are going to take the icebergs in the Saturn rings and pull them to supply water and oxygen to all the communities on the moons of Jupiter, on the big asteroids, and everywhere, on Mars too, because Mars is colonized and there is a government. There are 2 superpowers in the solar system. One is Earth, governed by United Nations, and the other one is Mars with their own government. Well, The books are more interesting than the movies. The movies are fun enough, however. Nice science fiction, let me say. I call it post-dystopian science fiction because
Good.
yes, it's modern science fiction because we come from 40 years of dystopian science fiction in the movies, especially.
Right.
Because yes, I think it was uh, the the effect of the radical ecologism view that saw science and technology as the evil that ruined, wasted the world, wasted the planet, wasted the nature, etc., etc. And it was this period was a criticism to human intelligence
Right.
in very short terms. And many movies were, I don't know, I can only mention Gravity, for instance.
Right.
That horrible movie. that
Well, I loved it, but I loved it while
yes,
I
but
resented the fact that the technology was all 60 years old, and
yeah,
if they'd had 3D of equal quality, they could have made the movie 50 years ago, 40 years ago.
yeah. But however, everything is bad in that movie. Everything goes bad, and when Sandra Bullock reach Earth again, she kiss Earth and say, "Okay, I want to stay here.
Right.
Space is such a dangerous place to to
Good.
be. I don't want to go back in space, etc." This is the
Good
message.
point.
So
Right.
no, it was from the cinematographic point of view. It was not a bad movie. It was nice, and there was suspense and everything.
Right.
But from the philosophical point of view,
Right. Now, I agree with you about the dystopianism of the last 40 to 50
yeah,
years tremendously, and I am profoundly disturbed by it. And one of the reasons, look, a bunch of people prevailed on me a dozen years ago to come into the space community. And it included people from NASA, people from the National Science Foundation, some very august people. And they piled up on me and they beat me up and they dragged me to a space convention
yeah,
against my will. And I'm glad they did, because space, when I was 10 years old, and when I first got involved in theoretical physics and microbiology, the two sciences I began with, I felt that since nobody wanted me in my hometown of Buffalo, New York, um, maybe there'd be room for me in space. Maybe somebody would want me in space. So space had been where I started, and I used to carry a pamphlet for engineers, and it was a pamphlet for engineers that gave all of the liftoff velocities of various rockets, and its aim, because I was 10 years old, it was 1953. The aim was to do something impossible that no human could possibly do, and that was to get something into Earth orbit.
yeah.
This was 4 years before Sputnik, and my wall had a poster of all of the various sounding rockets that have been sent into not space, a suborbital space,
Yeah.
and the height that each one had reached. So it was good that they dragged me into the space community, because that's part of where I had gotten started in
Oh well,
science.
of
But
course.
the
Sorry.
dystopian aspect of things, in we started this new myth that man has ruined nature and has destroyed the planet and has run out of resources in the 1960s. A culture is always a battle between different subcultures, controlling, vying with each other, battling with each other for control. And there were a bunch of very sour-faced environmental people who somehow began winning the subcultural battles in the 1960s. And the fact is that we humans have been aiding nature. Once upon a time, 125 million years ago, some extremely clever natural species figured out something radically new: how to sucker an entirely different species. Let me just get a drink of water here. But how to sucker an entirely different species into helping them expand. helping them become imperialistic and colonialistic. Those natural objects that did this, those natural creatures, were plants. And the first creatures of another species that they suckered into an agreement to spread them explosively were insects. And insects became their pollinators. Insects became their Federal Express and their UPS. Insects delivered sexual bundles for these plants. How did they get the insects to do it? By paying the insects off. They made extra nectar. They made extra pollen. And that nectar and pollen became the insect's paycheck. 100 million years later, plants did it again, this time with a different group of suckers, a different group of another species. And they convinced that species to take their seeds, to cross-pollinate the seeds so that eventually the seeds wouldn't have to drop to the ground in order to find some place to live and grow. So the seeds could hold on to the plant, stay with the plant. They got the humans to find wonderful pieces of land for them that they didn't have to find for themselves through trial and error, to actually remove all the other plants from that land so they could own it exclusively, to irrigate that land. Sometimes the land hadn't been fit for plants or had been fit for only a tiny number of plants. Now, with irrigation, it can be fit for a large number of plants. And the plants, the beasts that the plants suckered into this arrangement, find me new land, clear the land for me, fertilize the land for me, water the land for me, and then I will sacrifice at a certain point in my life and you can eat me. That deal they made with human beings. Plants invented agriculture. And the result is that there are vast tracts of land that were inadequate for plants, that plants couldn't occupy, that humans have gone out and made perfect for plants through irrigation, through fertilization, through a variety of means. And we're still doing that for plants. My bet, and it's only a bet because there was no way of finding this in any of the literature, and I've spent years combing the literature for this, is that the amount of biomass on this planet, the amount of living green stuff on this planet has increased because since humans have been here, not decreased. Yes, the number of species may have gone down, but there have been 148 mass extinctions on this planet, and none of them happened because of tailpipes. None of them happened because of smokestacks. None of them happened because of human technology. And but there is a group, I started to run into them when I was in college in the early 1960s, of people who hate technology. Now, I'm in no position to hate technology. I love technology. If you could see, if you could see what I'm wearing right now, I'm wearing so many technological objects. Oh, did I remember? No, I forgot something vital. Okay, but I'm wearing technological objects all over me. And I've got 2 Kindles attached to one hip. I've got my cell phone. Normally I have a little recorder that records all day long. I forgot to put that on today. And it's just gadgets all over the place, electronic stuff. I've got my portable Wi-Fi device here in my pocket. All kinds of things. These are my what do they call in medicine? If you lose a leg, they give you an artificial leg. Yes. These are my prosthetics. Yeah, and without them, and I'm 74 years old. This week I did 800.
Are you sorry? Are you 74?
I'm 74 years old, and I did 800 push-ups on Tuesday, 800 push-ups on Wednesday without stopping. I actually would not be here alive today at all if it weren't for, well, a bunch of drugs. You and I talked about this offline. I had a 15-year illness that trapped me in a bedroom, and I managed to get out of it. And so the drugs, that's part of modern technology. The drugs that got me out of that bedroom are part of what keep me young. And all of these gadgets keep me young. Once upon a time,
of course.
One of my fans and friends was the 11th president of India, a guy who was kind enough to say that my work was a visionary creation. Now, I had an interlocutor. I had a person with whom I had to negotiate whenever I wanted to do something with the 11th president of India. And my friend was in his mid-70s, which to me at that time seemed like a hideously old age. And his sister was 2 years older than he was. And one day I got him on Skype at a time of day which was normal, before breakfast, 6 o'clock in the morning his time. And he said, I can't talk to you right now. I can't talk to you right now. My sister has just flown in from Hyderabad. Okay, his sister was 2 years older than he was. He said she sat herself down in his living room. Remember, she's just flown from Hyderabad. 100 years ago, no such thing could possibly have ever occurred to a human being, or 120 years ago. Sure. And she sat down with her cell phone, one of those terrible technological gadgets that we're sure is destroying nature, and she called everybody he was sure in her address book. Okay, now what does that mean? That means that a probably 78-year-old, who normally, if it had been the pre-industrial times in India, who would have been trapped in a village, who probably would have died 30 years earlier, possibly 40 years earlier, was vigorous, healthy, and alive because she had a gadget in her hand that could connect her with dozens and possibly hundreds of her fellow human beings.
And keep her brain alive.
Exactly, because
that's the point.
The research that's cited in my first two books, The Lucifer Principle and Global Brain, shows you very clearly that if you do not feel connected to your fellow human beings, your cognitive capacities begin to die, your immune system goes into underdrive, which means that you're susceptible to all kinds of diseases. Your body begins to kill you off. But this woman had no reason for her body or her brain to kill her off because she was as hyper-connected as a 14-year-old. And she had the device, the pipeline, that allowed her to fill herself with her fellow human beings and to fill them. And it was a simple 7-ounce gadget in her hand.
Yeah,
so
excellent.
But there's another point, and that is that we claim that we have plundered the planet, raped the planet, and used up all of its resources. Adriano, this is insane. For every ounce of living material on this planet, for every ounce of biomass, there are 120 million ounces. That's 120 million, untouched. 120 million of ounces of dead stuff, just waiting to be kidnapped, seduced, and recruited into the process of life. Now, how do we know that life wants to kidnap, seduce, and recruit this stuff? Well, is bacteria life? Of course, we're life, but we'll forget that for the moment. Bacteria is as much life as you can get because bacteria is the original form of life. It's been here 4 billion years. Right now, 2 miles beneath your feet and mine, there are bacteria turning granite and basalt, turning raw rock into the stuff of life, kidnapping, seducing, and recruiting the dead atoms and molecules of rock and turning it into food stuff for life. Now, is nature trying to tell us something? If we are smarter than bacteria, why do they perceive this planet as a planet of unending resources? Why do they perceive raw rock as the material for bio stuff? And we think we have run out of resources? How stupid could we possibly be?
No, I understand very well. It's a very good concept that you developed. Yes, and you said a lot of things, very interesting things. And I had a look to your main works. So the brain, the global brain that you mentioned, and I also had a look to the abstract of The Genius at the Best, a radical revision of capitalism, where the abstract says that you are giving a fully, completely new vision of the reality and of what human communities could do in the near future. However, I would try now to, I think we can even not talk about the James Corey work because I think we have enough concept to talk about. But however, I will maintain this time horizon of 200 years in order to try to figure what could be our future of the civilization, not only of our species. I think more about the civilization, because I think that our species could also survive, but if it will not be anymore a cultural species, the civilization will be ended. Therefore, our goal, our main goal as an intelligent species will be failed in that case.
Well, we have to recognize that. Okay, go ahead.
So, what we say that our Congress, the Space Renaissance International Congress in October, is that the situation now is quite critical, because there is, for instance, Stephen Hawking. Not only we are saying this. Stephen Hawking says that if the civilization will not expand into space during this century, it will be in a very dangerous situation, running the risk of an implosion. And there is, on a completely different environment, a paper of the NSA, the National Security Agency of the United States, saying that in 2025, from 2025 to 2030, will be a very, very critical time period, with the risk of a global conflict with unpredictable consequences. That is more or less the same thing that Stephen Hawking is saying, with other words. So what we are saying is that being almost 8 billion people on this planet, we perceive, maybe we are not, but we perceive to be short of resources and of energy sources. Therefore, all the problems, and we have environmental problems. These problems we have, of course. Pollution is unfortunately a reality, and the plastic materials in the sea is, I think, the most horrible thing that we are not able so far to prevent and to recover. And so this problem, I think this is a crisis. This global crisis is a global crisis due to our growth in a closed system. This is what we said at that Congress, and we made our strategy for next 4 years before the next Congress, that will be 2020, that we have to try to help civilization to move the first steps of expansion, of civilian expansion into space, because so far we only had space exploration and we didn't have space settlement. That means that we have the paradigm of space exploration is still ruling, and space exploration is made by military people, military trained people. And if we try to bring civilians into space now, yes, 7 or 8 people did it, went to the space station paying maybe 30 million or something like that. However, these tourists signed a liberatory letter saying that they have no right. So they renounced to their civil right to spend this week of holiday on the International Space Station. If we are serious, we want to take civilian passengers in space to the cislunar space, to the moon, and in orbit and everywhere. Everything shall change. We have to have a legal system, first of all, space law system that we don't have. We have to solve 2 main problems that are the protection against the cosmic radiations and artificial gravity. And these are 2 scientific problems that cannot be solved by SpaceX or Jeff Bezos. I mean, SpaceX and Jeff Bezos are making excellent work reducing the cost to orbit. This already broke the monopoly of the ULA and brought the cost of 1 kilogram to orbit from $20,000 to $2,000 now. SpaceX give this cost. This is a revolution, but we run the risk that this revolution will only profit the satellite constructors. So we run the risk that we will increase the space debris cage in which we are surrounded, and that it is a dangerous cage, as we saw in the Gravity movie, and however, it is an incredible value that we have on our heads, and we still are not able to recover and reuse, but they could be reused. So, okay, just to tell you what we are saying, why we are doing this, because we think that opening the system and giving birth to space economy will reverse the crisis, will give hope to the people, will give a new motivation to young people. So for sure, we will not solve all the problems in 10 years. We will not send million people in space in few years, and all these things are stupid tales. Okay, but however, the two important things will happen. The economy will be relaunched at a double figures pace, and the hope will be restarted in the peoples. This will ignite, will trigger the Renaissance. So, okay, so we are thinking that maybe in 200 years there will be some effect, some positive social effect, both on Earth and in space. In 200 years, maybe we will have, I don't know. This is one of the questions that I want to give you. To know what is your thought about. We have maybe some million people living in the geolunar space, and maybe in working on the near Earth asteroids, and maybe first settlements on Mars, I don't know, or on the moons of Mars, or on artificial infrastructures orbiting in the geolunar space, on the Mars orbit, and maybe I don't know where, because yeah, we are more in agreement with Gerard O'Neill, than with Kraft Eric. You know that
right.
This discussion.
Who's Kraft Eric?
Kraft Eric was a colleague of von Braun, Werner von Braun, the founder.
What was his position?
The founders of NASA. Kraft Eric is a very, very excellent guy, because he was a scientist and a philosopher.
Right.
He wrote many papers. The most important is the extraterrestrial imperative, where he demonstrates that the same thing that we are saying, that if a civilization doesn't expand into space, it is over. And he was all for the moon. He wrote many papers about Selenopolis and building cities on the moon, and mining the moon, and using nuclear energy to generate power on the moon, etc., etc., etc. In the same time, Gerard O'Neill wrote his famous book, Colonies in Space, where he designed torus-made and cylinder-made cities.
The Stanford torus.
Yes, having artificial gravity because of rotation. And okay, he didn't think about protection from radiation, but however, the concept of an artificial infrastructure in space, I think, for gravity is very much better than living on the moon at what 1/6 gravity, that you cannot come back to Earth if not on a wheelchair. No.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that living in an artificial infrastructure, rotating artificial infrastructure, humanity can avoid too quick physiological changes.
Right.
That will change the physiology, will change our aspect, and in the expanse, this problem is mentioned because the belters that live on the belt of asteroids are grown up in low gravity. They are tall and slim, and if they come to Earth, they are not able to stand, etc., etc., and many things. However, just to pick up one element of these books, in 200 years on Earth there are 30 billion people, most of them unemployed. So they are living with a subsistence salary. Only the people that have a job, they have a bigger salary, so with the possibility to satisfy what I call the Iger Maslow needs. You know about the pyramid of the needs of Maslow.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
While the subsistence salary only allow to satisfy the basic needs. So I think Earth, more or less, just to make a cultural provocation, into 200 years, Earth realized the old Marxist utopia to give to everybody according to their needs.
Right.
But those needs are only the basic needs, because not everybody are allowed to give to the society according to their capabilities.
Right.
Because there are no jobs.
Right.
So my question is, in 200 years, is it possible that having had such a big industrial development, because to colonize the solar system, we must have a giant industrial development. They made spacecrafts, they made infrastructures, they made a lot of things. The society is still so backwarded, so not fully inclusive, so let me say not satisfactory for the majority of the people. And Mars is very much different in this story, because on Mars they have a project, a concrete project, that is the terraforming of the planet. So everybody's working hard, everybody's enthusiastic what they are doing, they are living a renaissance on Mars.
Right.
But Earth not. And the external communities are they have an association they call External Planets Alliance. That is more or less an anarchist alliance without a real government, and they feel to be discriminated by the internal planets because of their different physiology and because a lot of things. So these authors give us a photograph in 200 years that's not quite different from today. Let me say, to conclude this introduction, that to me, I would be happy if the civilization will still be alive in 200 years.
Right.
So my minimal goal is to have civilization to continue. Full stop.
Okay, well,
but
first
I would like to understand if we can foresee some improvement from the evolutionary point of view, from social, from ethical
right.
point of view, etc. So
I think that we can both foresee and not foresee improvement. And what I mean by that is that I believe there will be improvement. And it will be cultural improvement, because we humans are a multi-generational culture-making species. There are these bacteria in the sea. They've been around for 3.5 billion years. And each colony is so thin that if it were on the palm of your hand, even if there were 7 trillion individuals on the palm of your hand collaborating in one colony, and that's a normal figure for bacteria, you couldn't see it because it would be so thin. So these bacteria live in a community, they live in a colony, and on that colony, they sift out their food. They deposit little tiny deposits of mud. And when the colony dies, it leaves only a little tiny deposit of mud behind it that is as microscopic, as hard to see as the colony itself was. But over the course of thousands of years, millions of years, and billions of years, those little slicks of mud have built up. And now these places where bacteria live are the height of your chest. They come up to your ribs, and they're the size of a mattress. All built by colony after colony after colony, leaving a slick behind it that is so thin that you cannot see it. And culture is like that. It's called a stromatolite. Culture is like that stromatolite for human beings. Culture is not something that you and I create.
Stratification.
Right. It's a multi-generational process. And I don't believe that that multi-generational process is going to end. The other thing is, once upon a time, the development of culture was predictable. First, we invented the stone tool 3.1 million years ago. Then the stone tool stayed the same for a little over 2 million years. There was no major change. So in those days, making predictions would be easy. Yes, 200 years from now, we're still going to be making the same kind of stone tools that we're making now. And okay, this phone is supposed to go to my assistant. We'll see if it does, because she doesn't know how to operate these things yet. No, I don't think she's learned how. But at any rate, so we'll just ignore it. So at any rate, it took until 750, I get these figures mixed up, 750,000 years ago, until we made the first major reinvention of the stone tool. And what was that reinvention? Up to that point, in making old one stone tools, the older form of stone tools, we had chipped stone on its side in order to make a sharp blade. Now we took the stone, and after we chipped a sharp blade, we turned the stone over and we chipped it again on the other side, thus making an even sharper blade. And then
the double blade.
Right. Okay. So we did that about 750,000 years ago. And then for the next 600,000 years, almost 700,000 years, making predictions was easy, because you'd either make an old-fashioned one-sided stone axe, or you'd make a brand new Acheulean stone axe. Well, somebody's trying really hard to get me. So in the days of the two stone axes, it was easy to predict the future of culture. Although, frankly, Adriano, we don't know what changes were taking place in language. We don't know what changes were taking place in clothing, because these things do not leave fossil traces. For all we know, changes were huge. In fact, there's one indication that changes may have been far greater than we think, because 180,000 years ago, makeup appeared. And makeup appeared in 70 different colors. And what do people use makeup for? They use makeup to distinguish my tribe from your tribe. If my tribe colors itself in red makeup, you're going to color yourself in black makeup. And then we use makeup to distinguish ourselves as individuals within our tribe. So we get some attention, since attention's really what runs the whole show. But approximately 40,000 years ago, it is said there is a cultural explosion. And I say it is said because there's some uncertainty about that. We're finding evidence from Africa that it may have taken place earlier. One way or the other, all of a sudden, it was no longer easy to make 200-year predictions anymore.
Yes, that's so.
And it's stayed that way ever since. We don't realize how far back this goes, but from approximately 1780 onward, we've had massive technological jumps every single generation, every 15 to 20 years. And so making predictions has not been easy. For example, in 1836, there was a massive crash, a massive economic crash.
Yeah.
And one of the experts, one of the economists of the day, knew exactly why that crash had happened. It had happened because there was this new technology. It involved, well, let's go back a little bit further. In 1780, when the first steam engines were built, they were the size of a 3-story building. And by 1800, Sir Walter Scott, the novelist, the guy who wrote Ivanhoe, Sir Walter Scott said unequivocally, there was no way in hell you would ever be able to use a steam engine for transportation. It's the size of a 3-story building, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
And then came Fulton and put a steam engine on a boat, and you had steamships. And okay, so there was this other
Steam
technology.
trains and a lot of
Yeah, right. But there was another technology that had been used in mines. It was used to make it easy to get huge cargoes, huge masses of stone and coal out of the mines. You took a bunch of donkeys or horses and you attached them to a wagon, but instead of running the wagon on a road where there were ruts and bumps, you ran it on rails. Now, obviously, that could never be applied where you didn't have donkeys and you didn't have horses, but somebody figured out how to take a steam engine the size of a 3-story building, make it smaller, turn it on its side so it wasn't tall anymore, it went this way, and put it on the rails. Now, the first steam engines they tried to do this with flattened the rails, which means these devices couldn't get anywhere. But eventually, they got it right. Now, in 1936, we have this massive crash. And the expert, the leading expert on finance of the day, is able to tell you exactly why we have that crash. We have that crash because of a wild, irrational exuberance for a new technology called the railroad. How could you tell this was a wild tech? I mean, it was a bubble. For God's sakes, they were building more of these things than humans would ever need, because everybody thought he was going to get rich by making one of these railroads. And the result was there were 200 miles of railroad track in England, which was obviously far more than humanity, even 1,000 years from now, would need. And that's why there had been a crash, said the expert. Well, how many miles of railroad track were there 64 years later? 200,000 miles. 200,000 miles. That's an indication of how difficult it is to predict the future. And it's difficult to predict because strange new things happened. Until 2007, there was no iPhone. And until 2007, the iPhone was so unimaginable that there were major factions at Apple that said it couldn't be done. At Apple, that said it couldn't be done. So there are going to be what we've taken to calling these days disruptive technologies of all kinds. And they're going to come up in the next 200 years. The one thing that we can predict is going to remain the same is human nature. And why can we predict that? Because if you go back and read 20 pages from Plato today, it will seem to you as if Plato is has the same kind of mind that you and I do. And yet Plato was a complainer. He was a complainer about new technology. There was a new technology that had just come along that he was sure were going to destroy the minds of the kids of his day. The kids of his day were brought up, their education consisted in large part of memorizing 2 vast oral bodies of work that were transmitted from my mouth to from mouth to ear, generation after generation. And those 2 bodies of work are the Iliad and the Odyssey. And it was through being forced to memorize every single word of the Odyssey and the Iliad that you gave rigor to young minds. And the new technology, Plato was absolutely convinced, were going to destroy the rigor of young minds. And do you know what that technology was? It was the book. He thought the book was about to destroy the minds of kids of his generation.
Yeah.
Now, the trick is there have been many changes since Plato. The book has become popular. There have been the train, the plane, the automobile, the internet, a zillion things. And yet we still feel, when sitting down and reading Plato's words from 2,400 years ago, that his mind is speaking directly to ours and that his human nature is precisely the same as ours. So human nature is gyroscopic. Human nature, like a gyroscopic stabilization device, stays on its, you've tried to push a gyroscope or a spinning top over and it bounces back up where it was before. That's why gyroscopes are used for stabilization in rockets, for example. Because they just absolutely stay at what they were pointed at. Well, there's a gyroscopic stubbornness to human nature. and so much so that it feels like it's stayed the same over 2,400 years, even though it's gone through so many changes that the world we live in, Plato would find completely baffling and completely unrecognizable. So these kinds of huge changes are going to come beyond us, and they're going to make projections impossible. And we're going to say a lot of stupid things. I mean, back in the days when Sir Walter Scott, just 10 years after Sir Walter Scott said you could never use a steam engine for transportation, and when the railroad, maybe it was 20 years, the railroad was becoming new, another expert, an expert said you could never move humans at a speed greater than 20 miles an hour, because a speed of 20 miles an hour would kill them. It would suck the wind out of their lungs and they'd be incapable of breathing.
Okay.
Well, was he right? These are people who are trying to project the future,
No.
Sir Walter Scott and this particular expert. So what I agree with your predictions. First of all, I don't like expanse. All of my, I run the Space Development Steering Committee. I founded it. The people in my group are very bright. They are far more expert in matters of space than I will ever be. And they love expanse. And they keep talking about how realistic it is. All I have to do, and I've watched 3 episodes, but all I have to do is watch it for 20 seconds and I know why I don't like it. Humans are biophilic. That's a word from E.O. Wilson, the founder of sociobiology. We love nature. We love green stuff. We can't help it. I'm sitting here in my apartment with 3 plants trying to struggle to stay alive in the room I'm sitting in right now. Why? Because I need them. I need their greenery, and they need me. I mean, I make sure that they're watered. I make sure that they're fertilized. I make sure that they get sunlight. We need each other, us and the plants. Space that is entirely a matter of tin cans is intolerable for humans. Absolutely intolerable. And yet from 2001: A Space Odyssey until The Expanse, all we've seen, including gravity, all we've seen is space that's tin cans. That's why my manifesto for the future of life in humanity is called Garden the Solar System, Green the Galaxy. When I put you in space, Adriano, I've put an entire ecosystem in space. Why? Because you are 100 trillion cells, but only 10 trillion of those cells claim to be you. The remaining 90 trillion cells don't even claim to be you. They are autonomous bacterial colonies, as I said, of 7 trillion individuals each, which is more than one colony contains more individuals collaborating with each other and exchanging information and doing research and development than all the humans who have ever lived on the face of planet Earth. Just one of those, God knows how many hundreds of thousands or millions of communities of cells that you are inside of you. And they are vital to you, because when you buy a chocolate eclair, you think you're buying it for you. No, you're not. You are going out and buying it. That's true. You are chewing it. That's true. But who are you buying and chewing it for? You can't digest all of that. It's the bacteria inside your gut that know how to digest that chocolate eclair. And then what they shit out, what they defecate, that's glucose. And that's food for you. And the pili in your gut can suck that up and feed you. So you are a giant symbiotic ecosystem, a giant symbiotic ecosystem. So if I put you in space, I've put up a symbiotic ecosystem. But I need to put more than that up. I need to put up you plus plants. Eventually, I need to put up you plus animals.
Definitely agree. Definitely agree.
How are you going to stay sane on a trip to Mars that takes 6 months, locked in a tin can, even if it's a great big tin can from Elon Musk, with 100 other human beings, without a dog?
No.
Without a pet who gives you unconditional love, because that's the product that a dog produces, and it's vital to your existence as a human being. So we have to start thinking in terms of gardening the solar system and greening the galaxy, and that's ultimately our task. Look, this is a planet filled with very clever species, extremely clever species. And it doesn't need us to research and develop. It doesn't need us to kidnap, seduce, and recruit new dead atoms. into the grand process of life. Bacteria can do that. They can do it even if we wipe ourselves out with nuclear weapons. Sorry, bacteria have worked out a way to live in very heavily radioactive environments. They will do just fine. Cockroaches will probably also do just fine. So the planet doesn't need us for its primary goal, which is this kidnap, seduction, and recruitment. But what do we do that no other species on the face of planet Earth can do? It's not flying. Birds did that long before we ever got good at it. It's getting outside the gravity well. It's getting beyond the atmosphere. It's getting to one of those spots in space where a simple push of your hand will carry a vessel eventually to Mars, if you wait long enough. So our job, what is our job on behalf of life? What is our job on behalf of this kidnap, seduction, and recruitment?
Our job in terms of people that try to explain to the normal people why we have to expand into
right.
Space. So I think this is my job, and everybody that writes something or makes something for the future feel the same need. I
right,
think.
And it's my job.
That's a cultural need, yeah.
Right, but my job is to recruit greening the place. My job is to recruit gardening the place. My job is to recruit taking entire ecosystems with us wherever we go. We do that automatically just when we put up you and me, but we've got to produce not just the internal ecology that we carry, but the external ecology of which we're a part, and we are life's carriers. Look, once upon a time, there was a poison pill of a potential planet. It was a monstrous place to live. It was the home of climate change, not just climate change, climate catastrophe and climate disaster. It swiveled around its center, its axis, every 6 hours, which meant that if you had tried living on its surface, for 3 hours you would have been bathed in this poisonous stuff called radiation. We call it light. And for 3 hours, you would have been bathed in something equally poisonous, darkness. And the temperature every 3 hours would have rocketed up 88 degrees, then rocketed down 88 degrees. That's not to mention the fact that it was tilted on its axis. And as it moved around its sun, went through these huge, massive climate changes that today we call summer, winter, fall, and spring. And it was loaded with toxins, sulfur, potassium, all kinds of things that are poisonous, and it was being smacked by planetesimals that hit it like a spoon hitting a pudding at periodic intervals, not to mention volcanoes and giant pre-tectonic activities. And yet, there was this audacious batch of macromolecules. It was a team of cells and DNA that dared to take on this utterly impossible, appalling, hostile planet, and over the course of 4.1 million years, they have greened the place. They have gardened the place, not to the extent that we often think when we're worshiping nature, because if you take a plane from New York to LA, 3/4 of the landscape you pass over is dark and brown. It still has very little life. So we are still just the thinnest incrustation on tiny patches of the surface of this planet. Life has barely begun its process even on this planet, but we have managed to take a hostile, furious, appalling ball of stone and turn it just a little bit green. How many balls of stone that are hostile and furious are there above our heads? And what are they waiting for? They're waiting for life. They're waiting to be brought into this huge enterprise, the bioprocess. And we're the only carriers who can take life to these places. That's the only unique function. It's not the only, there are several others. But when it comes to the big picture of life, that's one of our most unique functions. And then there's something else. We are one of the only two species on this planet that are born naked. Every other, you take your dog out for a walk in the middle of winter and it's 0 degrees Fahrenheit, it's minus 30 degrees Celsius outdoors, and you've just had 4 feet of snow or 3 feet of snow, and your dog has a wonderful time. It can't wait to go outside and play. Does it put on a special coat before it goes outdoors? Does it make sure that it's carrying battery-powered paw warmers? No. It's the same clothes that it wears in your kitchen that it wears outdoors. The same thing with your cat. Why? Because it is complete with a thermoregulatory system that manages to handle everything from freezing cold to unbearably hot. You and I aren't born with that. We are born naked. We are born without fur and without that thermoregulatory apparatus. We are born susceptible. Plus, our dog is born with canine teeth that are good for ripping meat. And our cats are born with claws that are good for bringing down birds, for bringing down something to eat. We are built with only these fingernails and with with our form of teeth.
Opposable thumbs.
Which aren't capable of doing any of these things. Why? Because we are a techno species.
Yes.
Because we were born in a form that requires us to build our own coats, our own thermoregulatory systems, to build tools in order to bring down.
Yeah, indeed. I wanted to make a question to you. To try to, yes, we are approaching the end because I try to stay inside 1 hour because otherwise the video becomes too big.
Right.
However, just to drive the discussion a little bit on your one of your concepts that I saw even superficially in your work. You said before about gyroscope. The gyroscopical character of humans. Okay.
Right.
So that makes me think that you believe that our, let me say, our conscience, our awareness of our conscious will possibly remain the same, even when we will evolve and we will maybe integrate ourselves with some artificial intelligence. Maybe artificial intelligence will become more and more biological and less electronic. And at the end, I think we can have a fusion. This is what more or less some transhumanist philosophers think about the future. But I think one thing is very important for us, and it is our individual conscience. That each human is an individual, and of course, as you say, we cannot stay alone. We have to cooperate together because our creativity, if not for other things, not for other goals, our creativity have birth when we are 2, 3, 4 people together. Because what I say trigger new thoughts in your mind, and what you say make the same in my mind, and so we reach to new concepts because we interact. Without this, we are very much less creative. We can have intuitions, but these intuitions are not developed to become projects and ideas, etc. But we know that in the world there are many people that, how can I say, they love to have some kind of superior entity over their head. So someone needs to have a god, someone needs to have a central committee, someone needs to have maybe a super artificial intelligence over our head that is wiser than us and can rule us and say us what we have to do. What my vision is different. I think we have to develop artificial intelligence because it is in our possibilities. So we have to do it because it will help us. But I want to be myself having a tool that it is a system that is an artificial intelligence that can connect to the others, to the network, etc. But it is mine. So I will use this tool to take my decision because it will give me what can do a computer even now. A computer can compare 1 million different data, and if I try to do the same thing, I will stay there. I will stay years to compare all of this data. A computer can do it in few minutes and give me the results, the statistic result that I need to take my decision. So this is why it is so important to have artificial intelligence that support us and robotic tools that can help us when we go to work, to have orbiting, manufacturing, etc. But many people are scared that robots can take our place. And
no,
so
it's not going to happen.
That's why I'm happy with your definition of a gyroscopic character of humanity.
All these things are going to add to our powers, and they're going to add to our powers immensely. And if we think there's something scary about adding to our powers, what was scary about the railroad that did allow us to go at 70 miles an hour? What's scary about the automobile that gave us a kind of personal control over our transportation that trains could never give us? What is scary about Google? I mean, I use Google. Look, 74, you're supposed to start losing your memory, and I'm 74. Well, I don't think I'm losing my memory, but I've gained memory. When I try to remember that person in St. Louis who was talking about how to, or building a machine that would build walls on the surface of the moon using regolith that it sucked up from the moon beneath its treads, I can look him up on Google and I can find his name. I don't have to agonize about it for a day and a half and not have access to his name. The fact of the matter is that we have books every year coming out saying that kids are being dumbed down and shallowed by computers. Well, we had Plato 2,400 years ago saying exactly the same thing about books. We had the town fathers of London in the late 1500s saying exactly the same thing about this new entertainment form that they were sure were going to turn their youth into sexually wild and violent people. That was the works of Shakespeare they were trying to ban. They were trying to ban theater. Now we try to give kids books to make them smart. Specifically, we try to give them the works of Shakespeare to make them smart. And the fact is that despite all these complaints from old farts who don't realize that they are repeating the complaints of Plato when they're complaining about Facebook and Twitter and the internet, the fact is that kids have increased in the Western world, they have increased in IQ 35 points since 1915. That's astonishing. And if you give them their smartphone to use in taking a test, you discover that they have probably increased in IQ 135 points because they have access to information at a speed we never did. One day I was invited to an after party after an artist who's an interesting intellectual had just had a display of his work. And seated across from me at the restaurant table were two guys in their mid-30s, and they were talking about their little kids. And one said, well, my little kid, when he was 3 years old, became fascinated with submarines. And then he went out on Google and he found everything that he possibly could about submarines. And by the time he started school at the age of 5, he had the equivalent of an undergraduate education in submarines and related technologies. And the other father said, oh, my kid got involved in, and I forget what subject he named, and by the time his kid went to 5th grade, was 5 years old and went to 1st grade, he was the equivalent of an undergraduate scholar in God knows what the other field was. So you see these videos these days of babies, 18-month-olds, with iPads in their hands, and they know something you and I don't. They know that there's a complete universe in that iPad, and it's just a matter of learning its geography. And they flip from screen to screen to screen, knowing that geography that you and I never suspected was there. That's a whole world for them. And they grow up with, you are born with twice as many brain cells as you will ever use. And the course of growing up, the ones that don't prove useful in the environment of your culture die. Well, imagine how many extra brain cells are staying alive in the minds of these kids who, before they're really capable of talking, are already capable of flipping through the complete universe of an iPad.
Yeah. I'm convinced of that. Even all the whole intelligence of the humanity will grow up.
Right. Sure. So these devices won't replace us.
Because intelligence is like another muscle. It can be, if you make it work,
right,
it will grow.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Another muscle, or another mascot, or
Yes.
another appendage,
Yes.
another a
Yes. Yes.
prosthetic. It
Yes.
will
Exactly.
simply increase your powers.
Exactly.
So when humans came along, did they exterminate bacteria, their ancient ancestors? No. Bacteria used humans as trucks to go down to the store to buy them chocolate eclairs, and as chewing machines to chew the chocolate eclairs. And without the bacteria, we wouldn't be alive. Will robots dispose of us once they hit a certain level? No way. They'll need us. And we will find new things to do, because with every layer of technology, remember, we've been adding radically new technologies now every 20 years and sometimes every 5 years since 1790. That's a long time. And we have changed enormously in that time. And have any of our technologies tried to get rid of us? No. Have we found ourselves useless? Far from it. After we've developed all these
No. No. No.
machines, we've
No.
found new uses for ourselves.
No. We will never be useless. And I think that if the human intelligence will grow, human intelligence will even become more humanist.
Right. And as you
because
said,
because they will understand what Paul Anderson wrote in his famous series that was the Polysotechnic League
right,
science fiction series, that a corpse is not a good customer.
a what? A cart?
A,
Is
a corpse, a
right, a
dead, a
corpse.
dead,
Yes, no,
a
a
dead
corpse is not a
person
good customer.
is
Right.
not a good customer.
Yes.
So
Quite true.
if we want, this is nothing very advanced concept. This is a plain bourgeois concept, okay?
Right.
Normal, commercial concept, but it's fine. It is humanist and it is, let me say, evolutionary, because
Right.
it is projected to go over the murder, the killing, the exploitation, and all these kind of things.
Right.
If I want to have new markets to commerce and to in improve my life conditions, we have to be in peace. We have to solve our controversial in a fair way, and we have to to get to better ethical common uh, how can I say, governance models or
Right.
social models, or what can we call it? And having the abundance of the solar system materials and energy, I think we will finally have a platform to get something like that,
Right.
a better inclusive society, and then all this kind of thing.
Right.
That's why I think that the expanse is not such a good anthropological foreseeing.
Right. Well, I agree with everything you've said, and two little notes. One is that, in fact, you are 1/10 as likely today to die a violent death at the hands of a fellow human being as you were in 1650. That means the peace has gone up by a factor of 10, and we
Yeah,
haven't noticed it. We just
yeah,
haven't noticed it. The second thing is, what is intelligence? Individual intelligence is group intelligence. You
yes,
can't think without words, and those words were developed over the course of God knows how many
yeah,
tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of years. You can't think without concepts. Even when you go out into the woods, you've got Henry David Thoreau and a million other authors, no, let's say 100 other authors, speaking to you in your brain. When you come up with the idea of making some sort of a stone tool knife, you're imitating ancestors that you've read about. You can't survive in the woods without that army of ancestors that you carry around in your head. So yes, we are all locked in a prison of the skull. It's the darkest prison ever because it has no outlets to the light. Your eyes don't go directly. They don't even carry light to your brain. They carry dark chemical, neurochemical, or electrochemical signals. That's all that you translate into light. So as isolated as you are in their dark prison, you exist only within the community of humans, and a multi-generational community
sure,
that
definitely.
goes back hundreds of thousands, in fact, at least 3.1 million years. You are never alone.
Okay.
You were like that cyanobacteria, or that bacteria in the ocean that leaves only the tiniest little residue behind it, and yet the residue grows to the size of the height of your chest and the size of a mattress over the course of millions of years.
Excellent. So, Howard, we can close this conversation here, I think.
Okay, terrific.
Maybe we can have a new one in some months, and
I should send you a copy of the thing I just created yesterday on the next 20 years.
Yeah.
In space.
Yes, please. And maybe at the end of this cycle, I will try to get in a conversation all the people that contributed. So
right.
now
that would be terrific.
We have 6 now.
Right.
We had Stephen Wolf. We had Al Globus.
Right.
We had Daniela De Paulis, that is an artist living in the Netherlands. We had Roberto Paura, is a futurist from Italy.
Right.
We have Zvi Bisk, is a professor from Israeli.
Right.
Thinking about the future. And
Zvi Bisk?
Zvi Bisk, you know him?
Oh yes, he's a friend. Yes.
Oh, wonderful.
He's come to Brooklyn. I've taken him on my walk through the park.
Yeah, I will try maybe maybe I don't know, in September, or when we will finish this cycle, to have a Zoom conversation with all of us.
That would be terrific.
If it will be possible to combine the timing and everything.
Right.
It will not be easy, but I will try.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much, and hopefully I'll see you again soon.
Yeah, thanks to you for participating, and ad astra. Okay.
Okay. Have a good. Wait a minute. There, it's night. Have a good night.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye,
Have a good afternoon. Bye.
Bye.